42 years in prison, a daring escape, and 400 betrayed agents. These are the staggering numbers left behind by George Blake. His life is a testament to how loyalty can be swayed by ideology. Join us to explore and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on these gripping stories. George Blake, a name that evokes the image of a refined British gentleman, a talented MI6 agent, and above all, a mysterious man living two entirely contradictory lives. On the surface, he was the embodiment of loyalty and patriotism, a devoted intelligence officer serving the Queen and country. But deep within, he was the most dangerous traitor, a silent demon ready to dismantle the very system he served. The story of George Blake is not just a biography. It is a thrilling cinematic tale of deception, ideology, and disillusionment, a story that forever altered the landscape of the Cold War. George Blake was not a typical traitor. He wasn't blackmailed, threatened, or driven by financial gain. His motives were far more complex and enigmatic. He was captivated by the promise of a utopian society where everyone was equal and prosperous, free from the oppression of capitalism, which he viewed as riddled with injustice. His disillusionment began during the harrowing years of the Korean War, when he witnessed the devastating destruction caused by NATO's bombing campaigns. For a sensitive man like Blake, this was an indelible wound, convincing him that the Western system had gone astray. During his years of captivity, the works of Marx and Lenin gradually seeped into his mind, planting the seeds of a new belief, a belief so powerful that he was willing to sacrifice everything for it. Blake lived a perilous double life. With his innate intelligence and charm, he seamlessly blended into MI6's elite circles. He was respected by colleagues, trusted by superiors, and even married a beautiful woman, raising 3 charming sons. To the world, he was the perfect man, an admirable role model. But when everyone else was asleep, Blake transformed into a silent KGB agent, secretly photographing thousands of classified documents, from the identities of agents to the plans of top-secret operations. Every photo he took, every piece of information he sent, was a dagger in the back of the comrades he once fought alongside. Blake's betrayal was not just a shock. It was a catastrophe for Western intelligence. He exposed the identities of over 400 agents, approximately 40 of whom are believed to have been executed. He also betrayed Operation Gold, a multi-million-dollar secret tunnel project designed to intercept Soviet communications. Thanks to Blake, the KGB knew about the tunnel from the start, turning the entire project into a perfectly staged deception to mislead the West. After being exposed and sentenced to 42 years in prison, George Blake executed a daring escape, breaching the heavily guarded walls of his prison to flee to the Soviet Union. He lived a long and peaceful life in Moscow, hailed as a hero by the Russian government. Astonishingly, until the end of his life, he expressed no regret for his actions. He believed he acted in accordance with his conscience, insisting he never betrayed anyone because his heart never truly belonged to Britain. Blake's story poses a haunting question. How could someone live a life of deception so perfectly, and what drove a respectable man to become one of history's most notorious traitors? Join us to uncover the answers in the upcoming parts of this dramatic biography. Ed Walker 1. Childhood and background. The roots of a double agent. To understand George Blake's motives and transformation, we must dive deep into his childhood and complex family background. Born on November 11, 1922 in the port city of Rotterdam, Netherlands, he entered the world as George Bahar. His birth name hinted at his multicultural origins. His father, Albert Behar, was an Egyptian Jew who served in the French Foreign Legion and later the British Army during World War I. His mother, Catherine, was a Dutch woman from an upper-middle-class Protestant family. Thanks to his father's service, George inherited British citizenship from a young age. His name George was chosen in honor of King George V, a tribute he would later betray. Blake's childhood unfolded in a conservative, comfortable Dutch household alongside his two sisters, Adele and Elizabeth. His father, a successful and strict man, ran a glove-making business. The Behar family enjoyed a prosperous life until the 1929 Wall Street crash devastated their business. This was one of Blake's first encounters with the instability of the capitalist system he would later vehemently oppose. The most significant turning point in his adolescence came in 1936 when his father passed away. His mother revealed a long-hidden family secret, his father's Jewish heritage. This revelation shocked George. Raised in a Protestant household with no exposure to Judaism, he felt his identity upended. At a time when anti-Semitism was rising in Europe, discovering his Jewish roots left him feeling alienated and vulnerable, a sentiment that likely shaped his later sense of isolation. After his father's death, his mother could no longer support all three siblings, and George was sent to live with wealthy relatives in Cairo, Egypt. He was welcomed by his aunt and uncle in the affluent Zamalek neighborhood. There he attended prestigious English and French schools, mastering both languages. However, the most profound influence during this period was not formal education, but his cousin, Henry Curiel. A prominent political activist and staunch Marxist, Curiel frequently hosted discussions about communist ideals and the injustices of colonialism. Under Curiel's influence, George, a teenager searching for identity and purpose, became increasingly drawn to these ideas. These were the first seeds of communism planted in Blake's mind, an ideology he would later embrace as his life's purpose. This period in Cairo not only provided Blake with a solid education and valuable language skills, but also shaped his worldview. From a displaced Dutch boy, he was exposed to radical political ideas that began to challenge his loyalty to Western values. He started to see a more complex world where national boundaries paled in comparison to political ideals, a perspective that ultimately led him down the path of betrayal. In early 1940, as World War II erupted, 17-year-old George Blake returned to the Netherlands to visit his mother and sisters. He could not have anticipated that this visit would thrust him into the heart of the war. On May 10, 1940, the Nazi Luftwaffe unleashed a devastating blitzkrieg on Rotterdam. Within days, the beautiful port city was razed. His mother and sisters narrowly escaped to England, but George chose to stay. This bold decision was not an act of naivety, but a pivotal moment marking his transformation from a teenager into a covert warrior. Trapped in an occupied nation, George quickly joined the Dutch resistance. Driven by hatred for the Nazis and a desire to defend his homeland, he began working as a courier, delivering underground newspapers, that Maidenlaar.com, that spread anti-German sentiment across the city. This was a dangerous task, but George carried it out with skill. However, in 1940, he was briefly detained by the Nazis. After a month of interrogation, likely due to his youth and lack of critical information, he was released. This experience did not deter him, but instead fueled his resilience and courage. After his release, George realized he could no longer operate openly in Rotterdam. He decided to reunite with his family in England. At 18, he planned a daring escape akin to a spy thriller. Alongside two Dutch girls, he embarked on a perilous journey through Nazi-occupied Belgium and France, traveling mostly at night, hiding in forests, and seeking help from brave locals. Their goal was to reach Gibraltar, a British territory in southern Spain. The journey was fraught with challenges. In Spain, they were detained by Franco's regime and imprisoned. Blake's life seemed to hit another dead end, but luck smiled upon him. After 3 months due to Franco's shifting neutrality policy, George and his companions were released and allowed to continue to England. In January 1943, George Blake finally arrived in London, reuniting with his family. Joining British intelligence from warrior to spy. When George Blake arrived in London in 1943, he had no idea that his harrowing experiences in Europe had made him an ideal candidate for one of the world's top intelligence agencies. His involvement in the resistance knowledge of underground networks and fluency in English, Dutch, and French made him a valuable asset that British intelligence could not overlook. Initially, Blake joined the Royal Navy, hoping to serve on submarines, but health issues prevented this. However, his talents were not wasted. His calm demeanor, intelligence, and unique background caught the attention of MI6 Secret Intelligence Service. In 1944, at age 22, Blake was recruited by MI6, stepping into the secretive world of espionage. This was a defining moment, transforming him from a fugitive into a spy. His first assignment was with MI6's P8 Dutch section, where he supported resistance movements in the Netherlands and decoded messages. This work honed his skills as a covert operative. After the war in 1945, he was sent to Hamburg, Germany, to serve in naval intelligence, interrogating Nazi U-boat commanders. This complex role sharpened his interrogation skills. Blake's ambition didn't stop there. He was promoted and sent to East Germany to build an intelligence network using former German officers to gather information on the expanding Soviet presence. During this time, he began to feel disillusioned with Western policies and drawn to a different culture. To prepare for future assignments, Blake was sent to Cambridge University in 1947 to study Russian. There, he not only learned the language, but also delved into Russian culture and communist ideology. This was a critical turning point. From a warrior fighting Nazis, he began to sympathize with communist ideals. While other agents saw the Soviet Union as an enemy, Blake saw a glimmer of hope. This ideological shift was not sudden, but a gradual process. The seeds of communism planted in Cairo began to sprout. Blake questioned his role in MI6, wondering if he was serving an outdated and unjust system. These doubts, combined with his growing admiration for Marxism-Leninism, sparked an intense internal conflict. This was the period when Blake began to sow the seeds of betrayal, not for money, but for a deep belief in a better world. He had no idea that just a few years later, a new war would erupt, leading him to a decision that would change his life forever. Honor, murder, disillusionment, and the defining moment, becoming a double agent. In 1948, George Blake was sent by MI6 to Seoul, South Korea, under the cover of vice consul. His real mission was to gather intelligence on communist activities in the Korean peninsula. However, instead of reinforcing his loyalty to the West, what he witnessed there plunged him into a deep crisis. When the Korean War broke out in 1950, Blake was captured by North Korean forces and taken to a prisoner of war camp. His 3 years in captivity transformed him. He witnessed the brutal carpet bombings by the U.S., which leveled villages and killed countless civilians. The horrors of war sparked profound disillusionment with the West's so-called mission of liberation. I couldn't accept that a small nation was being destroyed to this extent just because of one side's will in the conflict, Blake later recalled. He began to question whether MI6 and its allies were truly serving a noble cause or acting as tools of a new empire. In the camp, Blake had ample time to reflect and read. He discovered the works of Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin brought into the camp. He studied them avidly, comparing their ideas to the reality he witnessed. Marxism-Leninism became a coherent explanation for the injustice and violence he saw. He believed capitalism was the root of global unrest, while communism promised a fairer, more peaceful society. This ideological shift was no longer an internal struggle, but a firm conviction. He felt a duty to act. In 1951, he made a bold decision that changed his life forever. In a reckless moment, Blake passed a note to the Soviet embassy expressing his desire to meet and collaborate. His offer reached Nikolai Lowenko, a KGB officer. In a secret meeting, Blake provided initial information, including details about MI6 structure. This was later verified by Kim Philby, another KGB double agent within MI6. The KGB quickly recognized Blake's immense value. Unlike agents driven by blackmail or greed, Blake was an ideological spy willing to serve the Soviets out of political conviction. They knew such a person was far more reliable than those motivated by profit. Blake received basic training in covert communication and operations. From that moment, he became a double agent, a strategic asset the Soviets used to infiltrate the heart of Western intelligence. He crossed a line, transforming from a loyal MI6 officer into a traitor for ideology, ready to supply every secret he could access to his nation's enemy. This decision not only shaped Blake's future, but also had profound consequences for the world of intelligence in the decades that followed. Sadid Bikwan, espionage activities, a double life and intelligence catastrophe. In 1953, George Blake was released after 3 years in captivity. Returning to England, he was hailed as a hero, a resilient spy who survived war and imprisonment. MI6 had no idea that the man they celebrated had become a KGB double agent ready to betray every secret he could obtain. Back at MI6's Carlton Gardens headquarters in London, Blake began a dangerous double life. On the surface, Blake's life seemed idyllic. In 1954, he married Gillian Allen, an MI6 secretary, and they had 3 sons, Anthony, James, and Patrick. His happy family life provided the perfect cover for his covert activities. Blake exploited his position to access highly classified documents. He conducted his espionage with precision, using a tiny Minox camera to photograph documents during lunch breaks. He passed countless secrets to his KGB handler, Sergei Kondrashev, including agent identities, MI6's structure, and top-secret plans. The pinnacle of Blake's betrayal and the greatest catastrophe he caused occurred in Berlin. In 1955, he was sent to the city, a hub of Cold War espionage. His mission was to recruit Soviet double agents, but instead, he sabotaged Western efforts. In Berlin, Blake revealed details of Operation Gold, a bold CIA MI6 project to build a 500-meter secret tunnel from West to East Berlin to tap Soviet military phone lines. Thanks to Blake, the KGB knew about the tunnel from its inception. They used it to feed false information and trap Western agents. Nearly a year after the tunnel became operational, the KGB exposed it under the guise of cable repairs, humiliating the West and compromising numerous agents. The debacle cost the West millions of dollars and dozens of operatives. Blake's betrayal caused immeasurable damage. He exposed around 400 Western agents in Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union, with MI6 estimating that 40 were executed or disappeared. He dismantled intelligence networks, neutralized critical operations, and severely damaged trust among Western intelligence agencies. Every day, Blake played a perfect role in a drama where he was the star, and MI6 and the CIA were his unwitting audience. He felt no remorse. On the contrary, he believed he was serving a higher purpose far greater than the lives he indirectly destroyed. MI6, exposure and trial. The collapse of a double life. George Blake's seemingly perfect espionage career eventually came to an end. The secrets he sent to the KGB caused heavy losses for Western intelligence, but these losses also sparked suspicion. In 1958, a Polish defector codenamed Agent Sniper, real name Michał Goleniewski, informed the CIA of a high-level mole within MI6. Although Goleniewski couldn't initially name the traitor, he described a man involved in intelligence operations in Berlin and Seoul. MI6 launched an internal investigation, but astonishingly cleared Blake initially. Suspicion lingered, however. Repeated failures in Eastern Europe and the capture of agents forced MI6 to reconsider. In 1960, under the pretext of learning Arabic, Blake was sent to Beirut, Lebanon, to limit his access to classified materials. This was a strategic move, allowing MI6 and the CIA to gather evidence without alerting him. By April 1961, the net tightened. Blake was recalled to London under the guise of an urgent meeting. Upon arrival, he was taken to a secret apartment for interrogation. This confrontation was unlike any Blake had faced. MI6 and CIA investigators, armed with new information from another defector, bombarded him with detailed questions about failed operations. Initially, Blake denied all accusations using the calm and intelligence of a seasoned spy. But the pressure mounted. An investigator provocatively asked if Blake knew how many agents had died because of his information. In that moment, Blake's facade crumbled. Instead of anger, he calmly admitted to providing information to the KGB, not for money, but out of belief in communism. His confession shocked the interrogators. Blake revealed everything: MI6 structure, colleague identities, safe houses, and the staggering figure of 400 betrayed agents. The scope of his damage was far greater than imagined. In May 1961, George Blake was tried at the Old Bailey under the Official Secrets Act, facing 5 charges. He pleaded guilty to all, showing no remorse. He was sentenced to 42 years in prison, the longest non-life sentence in British judicial history. This harsh penalty was a warning to potential traitors. But for George Blake, prison was not the end, but a new chapter, an opportunity to continue his fight from within. Prison escape and extraordinary flight. The 42-year prison sentence shocked the public, but for Blake, it was merely another challenge. He was incarcerated at Wormwood Scrubs, one of Britain's most secure prisons. Life in prison didn't break him. While his wife Gillian filed for divorce in 1966, Blake remained calm and composed, astonishing guards and inmates alike. Within those cold stone walls, he forged a new network of allies, including unsavory but loyal characters. 2 of his closest prison allies were Sean Bork, an IRA member jailed for a bombing plot, and Michael Randall, an anti-war activist convicted for trespassing on a military base. Along with Pat Pottle, they shared a deep distrust of British foreign policy and became Blake's trusted allies. They believed his sentence was excessively harsh and politically motivated. Blake, with his calm demeanor and sharp intellect, convinced them he wasn't a traitor, but a man of principle acting on conscience. With their help, a daring escape plan was devised meticulous to the minute. Sean Bork, released from prison, coordinated from the outside and secured equipment. Randall and Pottle arranged a getaway vehicle and a safe house. The escape was set for Saturday, October 22, 1966, during a prison movie screening. At the critical moment, Blake made his move. With help from an inmate, he climbed through a window at the end of a corridor using a homemade rope ladder. He scaled the high wall and dropped into the garden below, breaking his arm upon landing. Despite the pain, he crawled to the outer fence where Bork was waiting. Bork hid Blake in a van's secret compartment, and they sped away. Blake's escape was a triumph. With a broken arm and enduring intense pain, he was smuggled through France and Belgium, hiding in safe houses. Eventually, Bork's van delivered him to a rendezvous in East Germany, where KGB officers welcomed him. The flawless escape humiliated the British government and exposed weaknesses in their prison security system. On October 26, 1966, 4 days after his escape, George Blake arrived in Moscow. He was greeted as a hero and generously rewarded. To the Western world, he was the most dangerous traitor. To the Soviets, he was a great friend who sacrificed everything for communist ideals. After a long and dramatic journey, Blake had found his home, a place he believed would bring him the peace and justice he sought. Life in Moscow, a hero in a new world. After his dramatic escape from British prison, George Blake arrived in Moscow in late 1966. His life there was vastly different from what he had imagined. Blake was not only welcomed as a hero, but also regarded as a symbol of dedication and ideology. The KGB provided him with a comfortable apartment and a generous pension. However, life in the Soviet Union wasn't always rosy. Despite being honored, Blake lived under constant KGB surveillance. As a Westerner, his loyalty was quietly questioned. His greatest disappointment was the gap between the communist utopia he envisioned and the harsh reality of Soviet society. He expected an ideal world, but found a bureaucratic system rife with control and lacking personal freedom. Life in Moscow was nothing like the ideals I read about, Blake later admitted. I thought they would achieve their goals, but they didn't. Nevertheless, Blake adapted and found new purpose. He worked as a translator for the Institute of World Economy and International Relations, translating Dutch documents into Russian. This job provided stability and allowed him to use his intellect. In his personal life, Blake found new happiness. In 1968, he married Ida, a Soviet woman, and they had a son named Misha. Though divorced from his first wife, Blake maintained contact with his mother and sons through letters. Later in life, he reunited with his sons in Moscow, and despite ideological differences, they reconciled. In his later years, George Blake was regarded as a significant historical figure. He was promoted to KGB colonel and received prestigious awards, including the Order of Lenin, the highest Soviet honor for a non-citizen. In 2007, President Vladimir Putin awarded him the Order of Friendship, recognizing his long service to Russia. In 1990, he published his autobiography, No Other Choice, explaining his motives and defending his actions. He claimed he wasn't a traitor, but a man acting on belief. He believed his life was shaped by the major events of the 20th century, leaving him no choice but to follow Marxism-Leninism. George Blake lived a long and eventful life, passing away on December 26, 2020, at age 98. He was buried with Russian military honors in a Moscow cemetery, a fitting end for a man who devoted his life to a nation not his own. Nanas Nanchsidru. Legacy and controversy. Traitor or hero? George Blake's death at age 98 closed a dramatic chapter of the Cold War. Yet his legacy remains contentious, filled with unanswered questions. He is a polarizing figure celebrated in Russia and despised in the West. Blake's greatest impact on the intelligence world was the catastrophic damage he inflicted on Western agencies. He exposed over 400 agents with MI6, estimating 40 were executed or disappeared. His betrayal dismantled intelligence networks, neutralized multi-million-dollar operations, and eroded trust among allies. The Blake case forced a complete overhaul of MI6's security and recruitment protocols, a change paid for in blood and tears. In the West, Blake is seen as an unforgivable traitor who betrayed his country for misguided ideals. His lack of remorse for the lives lost infuriated the British public. Colleagues felt deeply betrayed, unable to comprehend how a man with a successful career and happy family could cause such devastation. In Russia, however, he was hailed as a hero and a model of ideological loyalty. The Russian government honored him with prestigious medals and a comfortable life. To them, Blake was not a traitor, but a courageous man who acted on his beliefs, standing on the right side of the ideological divide. One of the most controversial aspects of Blake's case was his 42-year prison sentence. Though the longest non-life sentence in British history, some argued it was too lenient for his crimes. Others, particularly those who aided his escape, believed it was politically motivated and excessively harsh. The Blake case sparked debates about the ethics of intelligence operations and their moral boundaries. In his autobiography and later interviews, Blake maintained he had no regrets. "I never felt I betrayed Britain," he said. "I never belonged to it. My loyalty was not to a nation, but to an ideal, to Marxism-Leninism." This statement encapsulated his life, a man loyal not to a country, but to an ideology. Ultimately, George Blake's story is more than that of a double agent. It is a reminder of the fragility of loyalty, the power of belief, and the unforeseen consequences of a single decision. His legacy will forever serve as a cautionary tale for the intelligence world and a haunting story of a man who chose his own path regardless of the cost. Join us to explore and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on these gripping stories.